What if Spider-Man had starred Leonardo DiCaprio and been directed by James Cameron? What if Arnold Schwarzenegger's most dangerous on-set moment involved not explosions, but an angry horse? From Ice Cube tray divorces to improvised stripteases, the making of True Lies was as wild as the movie itself. This 100 million blockbuster broke records, sparked controversies, and nearly killed its star in ways you'd never expect. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about True Lies 1994. Fact 1. Cameron's Spider-Man detour. Before James Cameron ever thought about making True Lies, he had his sights set on bringing Spider-Man to the big screen in what would have been one of the most unconventional superhero movies ever made. After finishing filming on True Lies in 1993, Cameron submitted a completed screenplay to Carolco Pictures for a Spider-Man adaptation that had been stuck in development hell since 1985. This wasn't going to be your typical friendly neighborhood Spider-Man story, though, as Cameron had envisioned a much darker, rated version that would have completely changed the superhero movie landscape. Cameron's dream casting was equally surprising, with Leonardo DiCaprio attached to play Peter Parker and Arnold Schwarzenegger set to portray Dr. Octopus. At the time, DiCaprio was still in his late teens and hadn't yet become the megastar he is today, while Schwarzenegger would have made for an intimidating villain with his imposing physical presence. The script itself was described as a 50-page scriptment, which was part screenplay and part treatment, and it contained heavy profanity, mature themes, and even a sex scene between Spider-Man and Mary Jane Watson on the Brooklyn Bridge. Cameron's version would have featured variations of classic villains Electro and Sandman, but with completely different backstories than comic book fans would recognize. The story was planned to climax with a massive battle on top of the World Trade Center, and unlike most superhero films, Peter Parker would have revealed his secret identity to Mary Jane by the end. However, legal complications with the Spider-Man rights and disagreements between Cameron and the studio ultimately killed the project. When Carolco Pictures went bankrupt, Cameron decided to focus his energy on True Lies instead, while his Spider-Man script was eventually reworked years later into Sam Raimi's 2002 Spider-Man film starring Tobey Maguire, though by then it bore little resemblance to Cameron's original vision. Fact 2. First 100 million movie. True Lies earned a place in the Guinness Book of World Records as the first film in cinema history to cross the $100 million production budget threshold, a milestone that seems almost quaint by today's blockbuster standards. The film's budget was estimated between $100 and $120 million, which was an absolutely staggering amount of money for 1994, when most big-budget action films cost around $30 to $50 million to produce. James Cameron had already shown a tendency toward expensive filmmaking with Terminator 2. Judgment Day, which had cost close to $100 million 3 years earlier, but True Lies officially broke that barrier for the first time. Cameron was notoriously secretive about discussing the film's massive budget, often deflecting questions from reporters by joking that the movie cost $7.50 plus parking, $8 in New York. When pressed about the astronomical price tag, he would argue that classic epics like Spartacus, Gone with the Wind, or Cleopatra would probably cost around $200 million in adjusted 1994 money, so his budget wasn't really that outrageous by historical standards. The director was adamant that films should be judged on whether they succeeded at their stated goals rather than on how much money was spent making them. The enormous budget went toward every aspect of the production, from Arnold Schwarzenegger's $20 million salary to the elaborate practical effects and 7-month filming schedule that took the crew to locations across the United States. Cameron spared no expense on details, even making small digital alterations to scenes that cost significant amounts of money. The film's success at the box office, earning nearly $379 million worldwide, proved that audiences were willing to pay for Cameron's expensive vision, and it opened the floodgates for the era of 9-figure budgets that would become standard practice in Hollywood within just a few years. Fact 3. Jaime Lee's birthday helicopter stunt. Jaime Lee Curtis insisted on performing one of the most dangerous stunts in True Lies herself, and she chose to do it on her birthday, making it either the most memorable birthday celebration ever or the most terrifying way to mark another year of life. The scene in question involves her character Helen being rescued from a limousine that's dangling off the destroyed Florida Keys Bridge, with Arnold Schwarzenegger's Harry hanging from a helicopter to pull her to safety. This wasn't just a simple wire work setup either, as Curtis was suspended on a 250-foot cable above the actual ocean water, making the stunt incredibly risky for even the most experienced performers. The production team had arranged for a professional stunt double to handle this particular sequence, which would have been the standard approach for such a dangerous scene involving the film's lead actress. However, Curtis was determined to do the stunt herself and refused to let anyone else take her place, even though it meant being dangled high above the water while helicopters flew around her and cameras captured every moment. The timing of the stunt made it even more remarkable, as Curtis happened to be celebrating her birthday on the day they filmed this heart-stopping sequence. James Cameron later revealed in behind-the-scenes documentaries that the stunt was incredibly difficult to coordinate and required perfect timing between multiple helicopters, camera crews, and safety personnel. The cable that Curtis was attached to was strong enough to lift an elephant, according to the film's crew, but that didn't make the experience any less nerve-wracking for everyone involved. Cameron himself operated one of the cameras from a helicopter during the sequence, and he described the moment as one and done, because everything had to work perfectly on the first take. Curtis later said that performing this stunt was something she would never have the opportunity to do again, and she called the entire experience magical, despite the obvious dangers involved. Fact 4. Ice Cube Tray Divorce Drama. One of the most memorable and bitter lines in True Lies came straight from Tom Arnold's real-life divorce nightmare, when his character Gib tells Harry about his ex-wife taking everything from their house, including even the ice cube trays from the freezer, followed by the incredulous question, what kind of sick bitch takes the ice cube trays out of the freezer? This wasn't just clever screenwriting by James Cameron, but actually happened to Arnold during his messy divorce from comedian Roseanne Barr, which was playing out in the tabloids while True Lies was being filmed in 1993 and 1994. Arnold was going through an incredibly difficult separation from Barr at the time, and he had been venting his frustrations to director James Cameron on the movie, said about the vindictive things his soon-to-be ex-wife was doing during their split. According to Arnold, when he came home one day, Roseanne had not only moved out but had taken practically everything from their house, including remote controls, and had even thrown his clothes into the swimming pool. The final insult, which Arnold found particularly petty and spiteful, was discovering that she had removed all the ice cube trays from the freezer before leaving. When Arnold told Cameron this story on set, using almost the exact same words that would end up in the movie, the director found it so hilariously specific and bitter that he immediately decided to work it into the script. Cameron thought the line perfectly captured the kind of small, vindictive behavior that happens during ugly divorces, and it gave Arnold's character a moment of genuine emotion and relatability. The line became one of the film's most quoted moments, and it gave Arnold a chance to get a little revenge on his ex-wife by immortalizing her petty behavior in a major Hollywood blockbuster. The divorce between Arnold and Barr was finalized later in 1994, the same year True Lies was released. Fact 5. Completely improvised striptease scene. The most famous and talked-about scene in True Lies, where Jaime Lee Curtis performs a seductive striptease for what she thinks is a mysterious spy but is actually her own husband, was created without any professional choreography, rehearsals, or planning whatsoever. Curtis revealed years later that James Cameron simply asked her what song she wanted to dance to, and when she chose John Hyatt's Alone in the Dark because of its funky rhythm, Cameron told her to just dance however she felt comfortable, essentially the same way she would dance at home when nobody was watching. For 3 consecutive days of filming, Curtis performed the scene over and over again, with each take becoming more natural and relaxed as she got into the rhythm of the music and the character's mindset. The scene was filmed in the Crystal Ballroom of the Millennium Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. But despite the formal setting, there was no dance instructor, no planned movements, and no specific choreography that Curtis had to follow. Cameron wanted the performance to feel authentic and slightly awkward, since her character Helen was supposed to be a suburban housewife pretending to be a seductive spy, not a professional dancer. Curtis later explained that the crew kept getting quieter and quieter during the multiple takes, which made the atmosphere on set both more intimate and more intense as the scene progressed. The most memorable moment of the sequence, when Curtis slips and falls while holding onto the bedpost, wasn't scripted either, and happened because Cameron realized the dance was becoming too polished and sexy for what the story needed. He suggested that Curtis let go of the bedpost and fall down to break the spell and add some humor to the scene, which Curtis did using a safety mat. This improvised fall became what Curtis called the single biggest laugh she ever got in any of her movies, and it perfectly captured her character's combination of determination and inexperience in this unfamiliar situation. Fact 6. Arnold's near-death horse accident. Arnold Schwarzenegger came within inches of plummeting 90 feet to his death during what should have been a routine horseback riding scene, making it one of the most terrifying moments in True Lies production that had nothing to do with explosions or gunfire. The scene required Schwarzenegger's horse to stop at the edge of a building, so the crew had built a small ramp to give the animal more room to safely come to a halt. However, while the camera operators were measuring the distance from the ramp to their equipment, someone accidentally dropped the heavy camera boom arm directly onto the horse's nose, which immediately sent the startled animal into a complete panic. The horse began spinning wildly and rearing up on its hind legs while standing on a ramp that was only 4 feet wide and had no safety railings on either side. Schwarzenegger found himself on the back of a terrified, out-of-control animal that was dancing dangerously close to a sheer drop that would have meant certain death for both horse and rider. The actor later described the moment as realizing it was a bad situation and making the split-second decision to slide off the horse's back as quickly as possible, even though this meant dismounting while the animal was still bucking and spinning near the edge of the precipice. Fortunately, Schwarzenegger's personal stuntman Billy D. Lucas was positioned nearby and managed to grab the actor just as he slid off the horse, preventing what could have been a fatal fall. Schwarzenegger later wrote about the incident, explaining that if the horse had stepped even 1 foot in the wrong direction, both he and the animal would have fallen 90 feet onto a concrete floor below. The experience left such an impression on Schwarzenegger that he concluded his account by saying, "This is why I will always love stunt people," recognizing that Lucas had literally saved his life in that moment of crisis, when a simple equipment mistake nearly turned deadly. Fact 7. Curtis wore her own underwear. Jaime Lee Curtis brought her own personal lingerie from home to wear during the famous striptease scene, making one of the most memorable moments in True Lies surprisingly authentic in an unexpected way. The black lace bra and matching panties that became iconic in cinema history weren't carefully selected by the costume department or purchased specifically for the film, but were actually Curtis's own underwear from her personal wardrobe. This detail adds an interesting layer to the scene, since Curtis was essentially wearing her own intimate clothing while performing in front of a full movie crew and cameras that would broadcast the moment to millions of viewers worldwide. The decision to use her own lingerie rather than costume department pieces reflects the personal investment Curtis had in making the scene feel genuine and comfortable for herself as a performer. Given that the striptease sequence was already challenging enough to film without choreography or extensive rehearsals, wearing her own undergarments probably helped Curtis feel more natural and confident during the multiple takes required to capture the scene. The choice also demonstrates the collaborative relationship between Curtis and director James Cameron, who was clearly willing to let his actress make decisions about her character's most vulnerable moment in the film. This personal touch extended beyond just the wardrobe choice, as Curtis was heavily involved in shaping how the entire striptease scene would be filmed and presented. Originally, Cameron had planned for Helen to strip completely naked in the shadows, showing only her silhouette to the audience. However, Curtis suggested performing the scene in full lighting while keeping her underwear on, which she felt would be more empowering for her character and more appropriate for the story they were telling. The fact that these were her own undergarments from home makes this creative decision even more personal and meaningful, as Curtis was literally and figuratively bringing a piece of herself to one of the most talked-about scenes in 1990s cinema. Fact 8. The planned fall was secret. James Cameron and Jaime Lee Curtis secretly conspired to create one of the biggest laughs in True Lies by planning her character's comedic fall during the striptease scene, but they deliberately kept Arnold Schwarzenegger completely in the dark about what was going to happen. The fall wasn't a spontaneous accident, as many people believe, but rather a carefully planned moment that Cameron and Curtis conceived during their extensive rehearsals for the scene. However, the director made the decision not to tell Schwarzenegger about this planned gag, because he wanted to capture a genuine reaction from Harry Tasker when his wife suddenly tumbled to the floor. During the actual filming, when Curtis suddenly let go of the bedpost and fell down as planned, Schwarzenegger's immediate reaction was pure instinct as he briefly sat up in his chair with visible alarm and concern for what appeared to be an accident. You can actually see this genuine moment of worry on his face in the final film, as Harry starts to break character and lean forward to see if Helen is okay, before he catches himself and realizes he needs to stay in character as the mysterious figure in the shadows. Cameron loved this authentic response so much that he knew he had captured exactly the kind of spontaneous emotion that makes movie moments feel real and memorable. The crew had placed a safety mat on the floor for Curtis to land on, but Schwarzenegger didn't know about this precaution either, which made his concerned reaction even more genuine. Cameron explained that he realized the dance was becoming too polished and sexy for what the story needed, and the fall was designed to break the spell and add some much-needed humor to what could have been an uncomfortably serious moment. They filmed the scene multiple times, but Schwarzenegger's reaction in the second take didn't look nearly as spontaneous as his first genuine response, which is why Cameron chose to use the initial take, where Arnold's surprise and concern were completely real. Fact 9. Cameron's voice cameo. James Cameron made an unexpected vocal appearance in his own movie during one of the most intense chase sequences, though most viewers probably never realized they were hearing the director's voice amid all the action and helicopter noise. During the dramatic car chase scene where Helen and the sleazy car salesman Simon are being pursued by helicopters, Cameron can be heard shouting an enthusiastic, "Yeah, she's got her head in his lap, yahoo!" when Jaime Lee Curtis's character tries to hide her face by ducking down in the passenger seat. This moment occurs when the helicopter pilots are reporting back about what they're observing in the car below, and Cameron's excited exclamation adds an unexpectedly personal touch to the high-stakes sequence. The context of this scene makes Cameron's cameo even more amusing, since Helen is desperately trying to avoid being seen while she's trapped in a car with Simon, who has been pretending to be a secret agent to impress her. When the helicopters start following their vehicle, Helen panics and tries to make herself invisible by crouching down, which, from the helicopter's perspective, looks like something entirely different is happening between the two passengers. Cameron's gleeful shout captures the absurdity of the situation, where a suburban housewife's attempt to hide from what she thinks are enemy agents gets misinterpreted as something much more intimate. This vocal cameo is typical of Cameron's hands-on approach to filmmaking, as he was often personally involved in every aspect of the production, including operating cameras during dangerous helicopter sequences. The fact that his voice ended up in the final cut suggests that his spontaneous reaction during filming was so perfect for the moment that it became part of the movie's soundtrack. It's the kind of detail that shows how Cameron was willing to insert himself directly into the action when it served the story, even if it meant his voice would be preserved forever as part of one of the film's most memorable chase scenes. Fact 10. Schwarzenegger's Tango terror. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who had fearlessly battled Terminators and Predators on screen, admitted that his biggest challenge while making True Lies wasn't performing dangerous stunts or delivering action sequences, but rather learning to dance the tango with enough skill to look convincing on camera. The former bodybuilder and action star spent 6 months taking intensive dance lessons to prepare for the ballroom scenes in the film, because he was determined to execute the tango with the same level of precision and grace that Al Pacino had displayed in Scent of a Woman, which had been released just 2 years earlier in 1992. Schwarzenegger was particularly motivated to master the dance because both True Lies and Scent of a Woman feature the exact same song during their tango sequences, a classic piece called Por una cabeza, which meant audiences would inevitably compare his performance to Pacino's Academy Award-winning turn. The pressure of living up to such a memorable cinematic moment drove Schwarzenegger to practice relentlessly with professional dance instructors, working on his footwork, posture, and the smooth-flowing movements that make the tango such a captivating and romantic dance style. The extensive preparation paid off beautifully in the final film, where Schwarzenegger's Harry Tasker glides across the dance floor with surprising elegance and confidence, showing a completely different side of the typically action-oriented character. The opening tango scene at the Swiss mansion and the closing dance sequence both demonstrate that Schwarzenegger had successfully transformed himself from a muscle-bound action hero into a convincing ballroom dancer, at least for the purposes of the film. James Cameron later noted that Schwarzenegger's dedication to mastering the tango was typical of his perfectionist approach to every aspect of his performances, whether it involved learning complex choreography or performing death-defying stunts, and the months of dance training helped establish Harry Tasker as a sophisticated secret agent who could move seamlessly between high society events and dangerous missions. Fact 11. Miniature bridge cost millions. The spectacular destruction of the Florida Keys Bridge in True Lies required James Cameron to spend between $2 and $3 million in 1994 money just to build and blow up elaborate miniature models, making it one of the most expensive single-action sequences ever created using practical effects at that time. While much of the chase scene was filmed on location at the actual 7-mile bridge that connects the Florida Keys to the mainland, the dramatic missile strike and explosive destruction that audiences see on screen was achieved through painstakingly detailed miniature work that cost more than many entire movies had budgets for back then. The miniature bridge was constructed by Stetson Visual Services under the supervision of effects specialist Leslie Ecker, who had to create a delicately crafted plaster structure that could be shipped in pieces to the filming location and then assembled for the destruction sequence. The miniature had to be built to perfectly match the real bridge that had already been filmed, which meant every detail of the actual structure needed to be replicated in smaller scale, while also being designed to break apart and explode in a very specific and controlled way when the cameras rolled. Cameron was so impressed with the results of the first miniature explosion that he brought the crew back for additional work, setting up a second miniature sequence in the parking lot of Digital Domain in Venice, California. This second setup was designed to capture a shot where a terrorist truck would emerge from a cloud of explosion debris, land on the edge of the crumbling bridge, and then fall off in front of the camera before exploding again. The crew worked for 3.5 weeks trying to get this single shot to work properly, eventually discovering that they needed to replace the rubber wheels on the miniature truck with plywood wheels painted to look real, just so the vehicle would slide and fall correctly. The entire sequence required a complex combination of miniature work, pyrotechnics, and digital effects to create the seamless illusion of massive destruction. Fact 12. Digital Domain's debut film. True Lies holds the distinction of being the very first major motion picture production for Digital Domain, the visual effects company that James Cameron co-founded in 1993, and this debut project immediately established the studio as a serious competitor in the world of Hollywood special effects by earning an Academy Award nomination for Best Visual Effects. Cameron had created Digital Domain as a state-of-the-art effects facility that could rival the established powerhouse Industrial Light and Magic, which had been founded by George Lucas and dominated the visual effects industry for decades, with their work on the Star Wars films and other major blockbusters. The timing of Digital Domain's launch with True Lies was perfect for Cameron, since it allowed him to have complete creative control over the visual effects process, while also building his own company's reputation and capabilities. The studio took on the enormous challenge of creating effects for sequences like the Harrier jet hovering outside the Miami skyscraper, the helicopter rescue scene over the Florida Keys, and the complex digital compositing work that seamlessly blended practical stunts with computer-generated elements. Much of the miniature work was actually outsourced to other companies like Stetson Visual Services, but Digital Domain handled the digital effects, compositing, and the integration of all the various elements into the final shots that audiences saw on screen. The Academy Award nomination that True Lies received for Best Visual Effects was a remarkable achievement for a brand new effects company working on their very first major project, and it immediately put Digital Domain on the map as a legitimate rival to the established studios in Hollywood. This recognition helped Cameron attract top talent and major projects to Digital Domain, which would go on to work on films like Apollo 13, Interview with the Vampire, and eventually Cameron's own Titanic, which would win the Oscar for Best Visual Effects just 3 years later. The success of True Lies essentially launched Digital Domain's career in the film industry and proved that Cameron could build a visual effects empire just as successfully as he could direct blockbuster movies. Fact 13. Charlton Heston's pink eye patch. Charlton Heston's memorable eye patch in True Lies, which gave his character Spencer Trilby such a distinctive and authoritative appearance as the head of the secret government agency Omega Sector, was never part of James Cameron's original script or character design, but instead came about because of an unfortunate medical condition that struck the legendary actor right before filming. When Heston arrived on the True Lies set to begin shooting his scenes, he was suffering from a case of pink eye, which is a common but highly contagious eye infection that causes redness, swelling, and general irritation that would have been clearly visible on camera and potentially problematic for other cast and crew members. Rather than delay filming or try to cover up Heston's condition with makeup, which would have been difficult and probably ineffective given the nature of pink eye symptoms, the costume designers came up with a creative solution that actually enhanced the character in ways that nobody had originally planned. They fitted Heston with a black eye patch that completely covered his infected eye, which not only solved the immediate practical problem of hiding his medical condition but also gave Spencer Trilby a much more intimidating and mysterious appearance that perfectly suited his role as a gruff, no-nonsense intelligence chief. The eye patch ended up working so well for the character that it's hard to imagine Spencer Trilby without it, and it gave Heston's performance an extra layer of authority and toughness that complemented his naturally commanding presence on screen. The patch also created an interesting visual parallel to classic spy fiction and military characters, making Trilby look like someone who had seen serious combat and earned his scars in the line of duty. Some fans have even speculated that the eye patch was a deliberate reference to Marvel Comics character Nick Fury, though this connection is likely coincidental, since the patch was purely a practical solution to Heston's pink eye rather than any kind of planned homage to comic book characters. Fact 14. Arnold's accidental tape drop. Arnold Schwarzenegger's fumbling of the tape recorder during one of True Lies' most intense interrogation scenes was a completely unscripted accident that happened during filming, but James Cameron loved the moment so much that he decided to keep it in the final cut of the movie. The scene occurs when Harry Tasker is using his advanced spy gadgets and techniques to extract information from a suspect, and Schwarzenegger was supposed to smoothly handle the recording device as part of his character's professional competence and technological expertise. However, during the take, Schwarzenegger accidentally dropped the tape recorder, creating an unexpected moment of human clumsiness that contrasted sharply with Harry's otherwise polished and capable spy persona. Rather than calling cut and filming the scene again to get a perfect take where everything went according to the script, Cameron immediately recognized that the accidental drop actually added something valuable to the scene and to Schwarzenegger's character. The mistake made Harry Tasker feel more human and relatable, showing that even highly trained secret agents can have small moments of imperfection, when they're focused on more important things like getting crucial information from a dangerous suspect. The fumble also added a subtle touch of comedy to what was otherwise a very serious and tense interrogation sequence, which fit perfectly with True Lies' overall tone of mixing action and humor. This decision to keep the accidental moment reflects Cameron's willingness to embrace spontaneity when it served the story, even if it meant departing from the carefully planned script and choreography that typically governs big-budget action films. The tape recorder drop became one of many small details that helped make True Lies feel more natural and less mechanical than some action movies, where every movement and gesture is precisely calculated. Cameron's choice to preserve Schwarzenegger's mistake also demonstrates the collaborative relationship between director and star, where both were comfortable enough to let real moments shine through even when they didn't match the original plan for how the scene should unfold. Fact 15. The white frame punch. James Cameron inserted a single solid white frame into True Lies at the exact moment when Helen punches Harry in the face, using a clever film editing technique to simulate the brief flash of light that people often experience when they get hit hard in the head. This split-second visual effect happens so quickly that most viewers don't consciously notice it while watching the movie, but their brains register the sudden burst of white light, which creates a more visceral and realistic sensation of impact that makes the punch feel more powerful and authentic than it would with just the regular footage alone. The white frame technique is an example of Cameron's attention to psychological detail and his understanding of how the human brain processes visual information during moments of physical trauma. When someone gets punched or struck in the head, they often report seeing a brief flash of light or seeing stars, which is caused by the sudden jarring of the brain and the optical nerves. By inserting this single frame of pure white light at the moment of impact, Cameron was able to recreate this physiological response for movie audiences, making them feel as though they were experiencing the punch from Harry's perspective rather than just watching it happen to someone else. This editing trick demonstrates the sophisticated level of craftsmanship that Cameron brought to every aspect of True Lies, where even a simple punch in the face became an opportunity to enhance the audience's emotional and physical connection to the characters on screen. The white frame is part of Cameron's signature style of using technical filmmaking techniques to create more immersive and realistic experiences, similar to how he would later use groundbreaking technology in films like Titanic and Avatar. Most directors would have simply filmed the punch and moved on, but Cameron's decision to add this subliminal visual effect shows his commitment to making every moment in his films as impactful and memorable as possible, even when the enhancement happens too quickly for audiences to consciously recognize what made the scene feel so effective.